Good evening. Thank you for being here tonight. This is the Bountiful City Council meeting for Tuesday, April 26th. We welcome all of you, and we will begin with a Pledge of Allegiance given by Fletcher Murray, followed by a prayer by Aaron Fillmore.
All right, please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for this beautiful community that we live in. We're thankful for our community leaders and those who work hard to keep us safe. We're thankful for all the different demographics and perspectives that we have in this community. And please bless us that we can turn to curiosity more often than judgment. Help us to seek out the perspectives and experiences that differ from our own, so that we can come together with more unity in our city. And we're thankful for love, and please help us that we can strive more to seek out those who feel that they are on the fringes in our community. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Aaron. That was a beautiful prayer. Thank you. Now it is time for public comment period, and so anyone who wishes to speak can speak. You have 2 minutes, and there's 10 minutes total that we have for public comment period, and so if anyone would like to speak, feel free to come forward now and state your name and your address.
Mayor, we have a public hearing later today, and it might be helpful for the audience to explain public comment and public hearing, just in case someone was wavering on which one to
Thank you.
jump up
Thank
for.
you. That's a great point. Thank you, Councilwoman Bradshaw. So we have a public hearing a little later tonight in our meeting where we will be specifically talking about short-term rentals. And so that's the opportunity for anyone to speak on that topic later in our meeting. Now, if you would like to just talk about anything at all, it's your chance if you'd like to get up and speak for 2 minutes. If there's anyone interested in doing that, now's your chance.
Good evening. I'm Noah Wright. I'm the city manager for the Bountiful City Youth Council. I know this is a little bit earlier than our usual report, so I guess you could think of it like a midterm report. So just recently, I believe a week ago, we had our bunny hop, which was on all accounts an inimitable success. We had the entire council helping out, and turnout far exceeded expectations, which is exciting news for the future of BCYC. We'd also like to note the tireless hours and effort put in by our advisor, Chelsea Moultrie. Without her, BCYC simply would not function on the same level that it presently does. The BCYC leadership would like to propose the addition of a leadership memorial in the downstairs BCYC meeting room. Just a little thing with pictures of previous year's leadership, including this year's outgoing leadership. We were curious if that would be all right. Yeah. That's all I've got. Please let me know what. Yes. Okay. I'm out of things to say. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that report, and we'll have your advisor, Councilman Bell, talk to you about that idea. So thank you so much for your report. Anyone else? Okay. We are done with our public comment period, and we will move to consider approval of the minutes of our previous meetings held on April 11th, 12th, and 13th.
So moved.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. We'll now move to council reports. Councilman Bell?
I don't have anything to report tonight.
Councilwoman Bradshaw?
My report is that we all need to do whatever lucky thing we do. Our Trails Committee will be presenting tomorrow to the Thursday, to the Outdoor Recreation Grant Board to hopefully receive an additional $500,000 for our Trails Master Plan to match what residents have already put forward with the bond. The Trails Committee has put in tremendous work. The Vice Chair, Clint Watson, has worked tirelessly along with staff, Francisco, Brock, Todd. Lots of volunteer hours have gone into polishing this grant application. So rub your rabbit's foot or shake your beads or do whatever you do so that we can be extra lucky and hopefully convince them that we should win this, this grant. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those that worked on that grant process. Councilman Higginson?
Nothing this evening, Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilwoman Barr?
Only that I want to second what Noah Wright said about Chelsea Moultrie. She is a fantastic, fabulous, wonderful, terrific, amazing advisor to the Youth Council. And it has taken off since she has taken the reins. And the youth of Bountiful is lucky to have her. So,
Thank you. Councilwoman Price Hewish?
Okay, I have a few things to report regarding the Bountiful Davis Arts Center. First of all, the Davis School District show is wrapping up this Saturday, so if you haven't had an opportunity to go over and see the phenomenal artists that are represented there from our school district, please go. It is amazing. It will blow your mind, and these students are so talented. Additionally, this is a really fun event. I hope everyone will put it on their calendars. The mural that has been being worked on right now on the north side of the Bountiful Davis Art Center building will be unveiled with a big celebration on May 13th from 6 to 8 p.m. And this is going to be very celebratory and bringing more public art to our city. And finally, Summerfest is back this year, and it's going to be running every Monday in June from 6:30 to 9 p.m. And there will be food and dance and different cultural events from Native American to Andean, Greek, and Chinese. And this will all be at Bountiful Town Center Park. So that's going to be a really wonderful event.
Thank you. That's a great update. That's exciting. Okay, we will now move to consider approval of expenditures greater than $1,000 paid April 4th and 11th.
Mayor, I'm happy to make a motion that we approve those expenditures.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion passes. Thank you so much. We now get to recognize Mr. Jay Christensen on his retirement from Bountiful City, Mr. Alan Johnson.
Well, Mayor and Council, yeah, they're here. There was some discussion of which one was coming up. It's an honor to be here and appreciate having just a few moments of your time to honor a great employee. This is Jay Christensen, who's been our accountant for 22 years at the Power Department. And some of the things about Jay, as you go through there, he was always the one who kept everything in balance. Missed, I think in the 22 years, doing being there on the Monday to do time cards, I think he only missed it like twice in that 22 years. I mean, like, he was always prompt on getting things they needed to get out, when they needed to be done, looking into the finances of the department, following the trends and all the other things it did. So it was wonderful, but some of the things that I worried about Jay, and he may share with a little bit more, is there was a different side of Jay, is he always played in a couple of bands. He loves to play the guitar. If he took time off, a lot of times he'd say, "What'd you do?" "Oh, I just went and played my guitar and practiced." But he's been involved with the band the last couple of years, but apparently he's been being the leader of the band the last one. He was just showing me schedule, so I was concerned that was gonna have to apologize for his dear wife, Julie, for sending him home to him, but apparently he was home more when he was working than what he is now, so. Like I say, I just want to appreciate the fact what Jay has done, and I know we had some time at the department and auditing him, but it's just to take a minute here to let you guys know how much we have appreciated Jay, and how much we love Julie to allow it to be here, and so, we have just a small token for Julie here.
Oh, thank you. I guess I'm glad it came up. Thank you.
But I don't know if, Jay, do you have something you'd like to say?
Yeah. Thanks, my friends. Some of you have heard this before. I went through several iterations of my retirement letter, and let me just read several portions of it. The decision was hard to make because this job is the best one I've ever had. But the decision to retire is the correct decision. Retirement is trading money for time. I have sufficient money for my needs, but I could use more time. I have many things I want to do in retirement, including spending time with my wife, who was retired involuntarily January 1st, a little over a year ago, and has been home ever since. I need more time with my family, my church service, music, and yeah, I got slammed with that one. The leader of the band went in for surgery, and so I'm taking over for him for the next month and a half, and various other things. I'm surely glad for all of the time. Thank you, Alan, my friend, Mayor, City Manager, Assistant City Manager, City Council, and my fellow employees for the many tremendous opportunities that I have had working with you and everyone at Bountiful Power and Bountiful City. I've been part of a great team doing the right thing. I feel that I've been able to make a contribution, and I have learned and experienced many things that I would not have been able to do anywhere else, and all of this while earning a good living. I'm sincerely grateful for the blessing that this job has been to me and my family, and I'm sincerely grateful for my wife for making it possible in the first place. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Jay, I just have a small token here, so.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, after you're done with that, would it be okay if I said a couple of sentences, if I keep them appropriate?
I don't know the inappropriate sentences.
It is?
Yes. Thank you
For
so
why?
much.
Thank you.
For your good service. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Jay, is it
Thank
okay
you.
if I share with them what you do musically? And
Yeah, go ahead.
okay, so I don't know if all of you are familiar, but music has kind of a magical ability in memory care patients to bring their mind back to the times that they can actually remember. And literally, when music is played that they were familiar with throughout their life, they can pull up the lyrics and sing along. They know the tunes. And Jay has dedicated a lot of his free time recently and now his newly free time to just volunteering to go play in those facilities and play songs that are familiar to those folks. And that's the quality of man that Jay is. He's awesome. So,
Thank you.
thanks, Jay. It's been an honor to work with you.
And
Although
with
your
you.
PowerPoints were always way too long. I'll just say that.
Never 9 slides. Never made
We
it.
got through a budget meeting today without you.
And I was rototilling and spraying weeds, and it
That's
was
awesome.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your service, Jay. We
are
appreciate it. I hope you have a wonderful retirement.
Thank you all. Hope to see you all from time to time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We are so excited to recognize some of our outstanding high school students now. And I'd like to start with Woods Cross High School. Is there an administrator or a teacher that's representing Woods Cross? Okay, so I would love to see these Woods Cross students come on up here, please. That's right. And just line up here that's right. And maybe come up to the microphone too, because we're going to ask you to say your name and what your accomplishments are.
Hello, my name is Fletcher Murray. I'm a student Woods Cross senior, and I was the Science Sterling Scholar for my school, and I made it I was a semifinalist, so I made it to the final round, and I was nominated as Sterling Scholar because of my many science fair projects and my outstanding grades and participation in science classes at our school, and also because of this year I have done a project that involves quantum mechanics, and next week I'm going to the International Science and Engineering Fair in Atlanta to go and present and compete with that project. So yeah, that's me.
Very good.
So impressive.
Little short. Okay. I'm Margaret Call, and I was our school's Sterling Scholar in World Language, specifically French. And I made it to the state level, so I was a state finalist there. And then I was nominated. I have a seal of biliteracy in French that I achieved at the school. I've been French Club president and officer for a couple of years, and I've really enjoyed that, so that's me.
Hi, I'm Kaylee Orantes. I was also a state finalist for Woods Cross for computer technology. For the past couple of years, I've been doing a lot of computer programming and a lot of computer program jobs. So I've been working with Code to Success, and I recently got into the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, so I'll study computer science there.
Impressive. Is there anyone else here from Woods Cross High School? Thank you so much to the three of you for coming and being recognized tonight. Congratulations. Thank you. We'd like to invite Mr. Jordan Liu, representing Bountiful High, to come up. And I'll let you introduce the students that are here to be recognized.
Mayor Harris and City Council members and staff. My name is Jordan Liu. I'm Assistant Principal at Bountiful High School. It's my honor to recognize some of our teams that have had some success this year. We're going to just kind of go one by one because we got quite a few here. If anybody is here from the Unified Basketball team, would you please come forward? There we go. Can everyone your name?
Yep. I'm Riley Johnson, and I'm a senior.
Thank you, Riley. So Riley was one of our players. Our unified basketball team was, students of all abilities that came together and competed in basketball. Bountiful actually won district and state in their division. So that was our first group. Thanks, Riley. Second, members of the volleyball team and Coach Chisholm, would you please come up? I'm going to let Coach Chisholm introduce her player. Or should we let them introduce themselves? Yeah, delegate. We're going to let them introduce themselves.
I'll go first.
You go first.
I'm Coach Chisholm. I'm the coach of the girls volleyball team at Bountiful High School.
I'm Ashley Rasmussen, and I'm a senior.
And I'm Mia Ray, and I'm also a senior.
I'm Taylor Harvey. I'm a freshman.
I'm Claire Cook. I'm a junior.
Our volleyball team took state, obviously. Awesome. Way to go. Had a party. It's a good time. We had some first members of the first team. How do you say it? All-state first team? Yeah. We had Jordan Harvey, Taylor Harvey, Evelyn Chisholm, and Emery Satualo. Second team members was Mia Ray. Third team was Elle Burleson and Ashley Rasmussen. Did I miss anybody? I think that's right. Jordan Harvey was 5A All-State MVP. Evelyn Chisholm, 5A All-State First Team. and I'm repeating myself, I'm sorry. Region, yes. Pictures. Okay, yep, sorry, the first one was region, I mislabeled them. Our all-staters are Jordan Harvey, all-state MVP, Evelyn Chisholm, first team, Emery Satswala, second team, and Taylor Harvey, third team. Wonderful volleyball team, thank you. We'd like to invite our girls' basketball team members and Coach Burton. You might see some of these students up here multiple times because they're awesome. We'll let Coach Burton introduce himself.
Come up front so that if anyone's taking pictures, they can see you.
I'm Coach Burton.
I'm Riley Johnson. I'm a senior.
I'm Claire Cook. I'm a junior.
I'm Megan Youngberg. I'm a sophomore. I'm Daisy Williams. I'm a sophomore.
I'm Taylor Harvey. I'm a freshman.
I'm Lizzie McConkey. I'm a junior.
I'm Emily Pulsifer, and I'm a senior.
I wrote a little snippet here so I wouldn't mess it up. Girls basketball had a successful season ending the year 21-4 and sweeping region. This team's exceeded expectation. It was so fun to see them come together and play for each other. Fourth quarter seemed to be their time. The girls would lock in and find a way to win. It has been great to see the team accomplish a region title and being the number 2 seed in the 5A playoffs. Our girls basketball team.
And they were the standard examiner team of the year for girls basketball also.
I need to fire my note person because I don't have everything. It's me, by the way. All right, Bountiful Sterling Scholars, would you please come forward? I'm going to have you introduce yourself, your grade, and your topic. Let's go first.
I'm Brianna Mortensen. I'm a senior, and I was state finalist for English.
I'm Kaylee Castleberry. I'm a senior, and I was Sterling Scholar for Visual Arts.
I'm Emily Larson. I'm a senior, and I was the Sterling Scholar for Instrumental Music.
What's your instrument? Trumpet.
Trumpet, yes. It takes a lot to become a Sterling Scholar. All 3 of these wonderful ladies has worked very hard for their accomplishments, and we're so grateful they come to Bountiful. Thank you. We have one more individual award. Leah Gago, would you come up, please? Leah, would you please tell the wonderful people all the things that you've been involved in this year? On the spot, he doesn't know about this.
Let's see. So this year, I was president of the Multicultural Club at Bountiful High School, and I've attended every district meeting so far that we've had to go to, and I've voiced my opinion in many of those district meetings. And let's see. Also, as president of the Multicultural Club, I've made activities for our school to all come together instead of just my club. I've made it to where everyone can come together. It doesn't matter what club you're in, or even if you are in a club. I just wanted to bring unity to our school. And I've been in 2 musicals this year, both of them, taking AP courses, and that's about it.
To be fair, Leah didn't know exactly what the award he was getting. Principal Hogue just mentioned we'd like to recognize Leah for all the hard work he's done. He was the lead in both of our school plays. In Beauty and the Beast, he was the Beast. And Guys and Dolls, he was a lead role. I can't remember his name.
Nicely Johnson.
Yeah, that. And he did a great job there as well. The first time I met Leah, this is my first year at Bountiful High. First time I met Leah, he was actually cooking hot dogs and hamburgers at the very first football game, serving. The second time I met him, he was flipping pancakes, serving, and just every time I see him, he's always serving other people. He brings our students together. He makes me smile on a daily basis, and he's just a really great all-around student, and he represents all the great things we love about Bountiful High School. Thanks, Leah. And that's all. Thank you.
Are there any other students from Bountiful High that we missed? I wanted to ask Councilwoman Price Hewish wanted to make a comment, and then also as an alumni of Bountiful High, I wanted to see if Councilwoman Bradshaw would like to comment, and then we're going to ask Viewmont to come up. So,
I just wanted to make a really quick comment to say I also serve on the Bountiful High Community Council this year with Mr. Liu, and he has been such an incredible addition to the school. He is very inclusive, enthusiastic, he brought a lot of creativity and new ideas that were needed and so appreciated to the school. And just kudos to all of those Bountiful High students and Woods Cross and Viewmont. But I wanted to recognize Mr. Liu and all his hard work at the school this year.
Well, on the spot, I guess, I'm so impressed, of course, with Bountiful High students, with students from across the city. I have a special spot in my heart, of course, to see the extra tall girls from the volleyball and the basketball team. Those are where I spent my time when I was a student at Bountiful High. I closely follow your progress in the Davis Journal and before that in the Clipper. So just so you know, I was closely following the state basketball tournament. I was excited when we had the parade for the volleyball team. So it does my heart good to see that success from the girls sports team in particular. Because it's near and dear to my heart, from the skin and the blood and the sweat that I feel I still have left ingrained on the floor of the Bountiful High gym. So kudos to all of you, and then those of you that are shining in academics too. Just couldn't be more excited to see that the future is still bright for Bountiful. I know our city planner, who we share the same class of Bountiful High, so I feel like since he's enjoying this, I can't let him get away without just acknowledging that your alumni, your senior alumni from way back when are very proud of you and are still keeping tabs and paying attention. That's not to say that we're not also paying attention and keeping tabs on our youth at Woods Cross and at Viewmont in particular, because I live in a split household. While I'm a Bountiful High alum, my husband is a teacher at Viewmont. So I'm equally keeping track of all of those great things happening there, so that we're acknowledging them at our household dinners.
thank you. I just wanted to let her have a chance, because I think it's neat that she went to Bountiful High, but we all love Bountiful High, of course. And I wanted to be able to brag that I went to Viewmont. And so, but we're so proud of all of you, and I have kids at Woods Cross, so of course we're all just so proud of all of you. But I'd love to invite the Viewmont kids. If there's a Viewmont administrator or teacher, is there someone here representing Viewmont? I'd like to just invite all the Viewmont kids that are here, any Viewmont kids that are here, to come up. Are you a teacher representing Viewmont?
And I was
Okay.
asked to come just for wrestling, though.
Okay, perfect. Well, why don't you introduce the wrestlers?
Okay, I can do that. Come on up here.
Hey, I'm Marcus.
Say your full name.
Marcus Espinosa Owens.
There we go.
Yeah. I'm Moses Espinosa Owens. I'm a junior.
So as you can tell, they're twins. My name is Luke Gibbs. I'm one of the wrestling coaches at Viewmont. And this is Marcus and Moses Espinosa Owens. Those names ring fear throughout the state, just so everybody knows. So their list is pretty long, but I'll kind of go through it really quick. So Marcus and Moses both this year won state championships together. They are both 3-time state finalists, 2-time state champions, and both won together this year, which was fun. And they're juniors, which means next year we should have another one. Is that right? That's right. Something else that they just accomplished, which is incredibly rare, they're what we call Triple Crown winners. So they're both folk style, freestyle, and Greco state champions, both of them. So there are 3 styles of wrestling, and they are the state champions in all 3 this year. They just got back from what we call Virginia Beach, which is the National High School Coaches Association National Championship, where Moses took 3rd place and Marcus took 5th, becoming All-Americans. They're also team captains and have some of the highest GPAs on the team. So we love them, and they're fantastic.
Mayor, may I ask a question? Marcus and Moses, may I ask a question? Are you in the same weight class?
No. Yeah, we're close. He's just one above me, and I cut down just a little bit below him.
So he gets to eat more?
Yeah.
One other question, Coach. Who wins if these two wrestle each other?
I don't answer that question.
I win.
Okay.
I win.
All right, let's get a picture of them.
Oh, we're getting a picture. Yes, please.
I can go next.
Okay.
I'm just here representing the drill team. My name is Coach Kayla Bagshaw. If you guys all want to come say your name and do the thing.
Please.
My name is Caitlin Calabier, and I'm a senior.
I'm Kaylee Hilton, and I'm a senior.
I'm Tessa Bloomfield, and I'm a senior.
I'm Raisa Isaac, and I'm a senior.
I'm Kenzie McDaniels, and I'm a senior.
I'm Alex Dickerson, and I'm a senior.
I'm Janie Hadley, and I'm a senior.
I'm Olivia Preston, and I'm a senior.
I'm Emily Walk, and I am a senior. Thanks, guys. So today I brought all seniors, and I actually have 3 more. So we had 12 seniors this year on a team of 34. If you're familiar with drill, we compete in dance, military, and show. As part of like our competitions, we have regional competitions or just regular invitationals, region and state. And this year, for the first time in 25 years, we took region, which was awesome, and placed first in all 3 routines. And then we headed into state, and for the first time ever, took state this year. So, yay! And we also swept the competition at state as well, placing first in all 3, which doesn't seem, I don't know, like a big deal, but it is. It doesn't usually happen that way. The competition is very close, and so we're super proud of them. And yeah, drill's a beast. So
What time do you get up for practice?
What time do you guys get up for practice?
5 a.m.
Yeah.
And Kayla got Coach of the Year. So
Congratulations.
Thanks, Janie. Yeah, they get up very early. Very, very early.
That represents a lot of hard work by Kels. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's awesome. Very cool. Please come on up. Are you a Sterling Scholar?
I am, yes.
Okay.
And these are 2 other Viewmont
Oh,
Sterling
please,
Scholars.
Sterling Scholars, please come over. I'd love
Perfect.
for you to introduce yourself in your
Okay, great.
area.
So I'm Jane Jepson. We're all from Viewmont High School, and I was a state finalist in music for Sterling Scholar, and I play the harp. So that's my stuff.
My name is Beth Mitchell, and I was a state finalist for World Language Sterling Scholar. And I speak Mandarin Chinese. I'm up at Hill Air Force Base right now doing a Chinese translating job up there. So, yeah.
My name's Stella Wadsworth, and I am not only Viewmont High School's English Sterling Scholar, but also 2nd place in the whole state. And not only am I very passionate about literature, I am also releasing my 2nd poetry anthology this spring. And the biggest part, I think, of getting me to where I am is my internship at the Davis County Attorney's Office in criminal law under District Attorney Troy Rawlings. And it was such a wonderful experience last semester, spending time at the attorney's office, that I am actually doing volunteer work now. And I just received a full scholarship to the University of Utah, and after receiving my bachelor's degree, I plan to become a prosecuting attorney and go to law school.
Impressive. Thank you. Thank you to all 3 of you. Congratulations. Please come and introduce yourself.
We are the Viewmont Color Guard. My name's Delta Ackerson. I actually attend Bountiful High, and I was the captain of the junior varsity team.
My name's Addie Erickson, and I'm a sophomore, and I was co-captain of the junior varsity team.
My name's Rebecca Wistison. I'm a freshman, and I was co-captain of the JV varsity team.
I'm Gigi Albertson. I'm a freshman.
I'm Emma Albertson. I'm a senior, and I am captain of Viewmont Color Guard. And we have been working since the summer, and we barely had like 3 weeks of a break. And finally at state, about 3 weeks ago, all 4 Viewmont teams placed first in their divisions.
That is fantastic. He's trying to get a picture. Yeah. Just stay right up here so they can get a picture.
You're in color guard. You can stand in a better row than that.
Well done. Fantastic. Viewmont, thank you. Go Viewmont. Thank you, everyone. Is there anyone that we did not get to recognize? We appreciate you all so much for coming. Thank you so much. We'll let you have a minute to leave if you want to. Okay, we will move to consider approval of the purchase of a transformer from Wesco Anexter Power Solutions. Mr. Alan Johnson.
I'm surprised everybody left. I thought they'd all want to hear about this, but Mayor and Council, it's an honor to be here to you tonight to talk about these 4 items that we have. I will say we did take it to Power Commission this morning after we went through the budget, and all 4 of these have been passed with the unanimous approval of those that was there. And Paul Summer, who's with the Rotary Club, who's in Panama, called me to let me know he wanted to give his vote of support on it. So anyways, we go through it as we're still dealing with getting materials to keep moving into the future. We had an opportunity that overhead transformers are become available, so we went out to bid to pick up an additional 30 overhead transformers. These are the ones that would actually hang on the pole like in the backyards. So we did go out for 15 37.5 kVA and 15 50 kVAs and got 3 bids back. And it'd be the staff and the Power Commission's recommendation that we take the low bid from the Wesco Anexter for the price is $62,190. Again, these transformers will be placed in inventory and then just be charged out as we pull them out of inventory as we use them.
Any questions?
Nope, but I'd be happy to make a motion that we approve the purchase of the transformers as presented.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
That motion carries. Thank you so much. Mr. Alan Johnson, to consider approval of the purchase of cable from Irby Electrical.
Yes, appreciate that. Again, this is an underground cable that's, it's probably about the size of a $50 if you look at it. It's what we use on our backbone that takes from the main breakers or the feeders to go out through into the neighborhoods. We actually have identified in this year's budget to go up 1800 south to tie into a feeder to give us some additional redundancy and some relief in this area, that loading on the transformers. This has been in plan for a long time, clear back when we first envisioned rebuilding our the substation there on 18 South. And it's been probably close to 3 years now since we got it finished. So we're stepping through all the things to get through. So this is actually the cable to do that. One of the projects you'll see is the boring to actually put the remainder of the conduit in the ground to do that. Upon looking at this, we're finding that they actually have this cable in stock. This cable is a single source item. They're the only manufacturer that makes this cable of this size that gives us 600 amps capability. It comes with a 40-year warranty, and they have an estimated life of 80 to 100 years for this cable. Put that perspective, when I first started, all of our cable had a 20-year life expectancy, not warranty, life expectancy. So this is a big difference in quality. So it would be the Staff and Power Commission's recommendation that we pick up the 20,800 feet that we need for the project on 1800 South for the price of $211,264. Obviously, it's in next year's budget, but this will go into inventory until we pull it out after the first of next year and use it in next year's budget. So that would be, like I say, the Staff and Power Commission's recommendation.
I'm happy to, go ahead.
I would move that we approve the purchase of, oh goodness, okay, 2,800 feet of 1,100 URD cable in the amount of $211,264.
Second?
All in favor with aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Thank you. And Mr. Alan Johnson to consider approval of the purchase of 50 power poles.
Yes, as we talked about, we had a bunch of poles on order and had them staggered out, and they came back in and actually canceled our order. So we didn't have any coming in, and they were coming out, they come out of Canada, and apparently they had a wildfire that burned through their supply of poles. So we was able to buy a handful of poles, a truckload, which was within the approval range of these butt-treated poles to buy, and so we had some coming in. Well, apparently, the company has went out and procured a place to be able to buy, so they had a limited amount of poles. So we're buying a bigger load than what we would normally buy to bring them in to get our inventory back up where it needs to be. Again, this becomes single source because they are the only company that will, they call them butt-treated, where they just put it in the bottom, roughly 8 feet has got a treatment on it. Typically what they do is they roll them in a vat and completely treat the whole pole, which is good if you're out on the road, but where so many of our poles are in the backyard, this treatment becomes extremely hard. So when you have to climb it with spikes, it becomes slick, and they call it gaff out, will fall off the pole and injure alignment. So as long as we can, we'd like to stay with the butt-treated poles for the safety of our people who are working on it. So it would be the Power Commission staff recommendation that we approve the purchase of these 50 poles from Stella Jones for the price of $42,270.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Mr. Alan Johnson, for the last item, your last item, to consider approval of the bid from Down Under Construction for directional boring.
Yes, I have my last boring approval here. Yes, in the spring, we go out, we collect, we got money to money to repair underground streetlights. So we typically will look in and see which circuits are bad, had trouble in the past, and put them on the list. And the other kinds will come back and the ones that have failed. And we've currently are down way lower this year than we typically have. We have 2 that are for sure bad, we included in this bid. And we've got one that potentially the guy is going to go out and look at it that just came in Monday, so we haven't had a chance to get out onto it yet. This also includes the 3 distribution borings, and one of them is the one that's going up the 1800 South. And this will be going where they bored in, put the conduit, and get it ready to where we can actually come back and pull this 1100 cable or the other cable to give us some redundancy. There's also some work to get down into the Renaissance Center. So anyway, it would be the Power Commission and the staff's recommendation that we approve the low bid from Down Under to do the 2 streetlight projects and the 3 distribution projects as identified on the maps in here for a total price of $288,777. The first portion of this will be done in this year's budget. The remainder will happen after July and will actually be done in next year's budget.
Any questions?
Move to approve the directional boring contract as Helen has presented it.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
That motion passes. Thank you.
All righty, thank you very much, appreciate it. Thanks.
Now we will move to consider approval of ordinance 2022-03 regarding short-term rentals in Bountiful City. And we will first have Mr. Astorga, our city planner, give us a little report, and then we will move to some council questions, and then we will be opening it up for a public hearing to hear from anyone who would like to speak on this. So, Mr. Astorga.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. If you want to follow on your staff report, the staff report starts on page 69, and the drafted ordinance starts on page 71. We've had some discussions. Last one took place on April 12th. It was a work session discussion, and what we're doing here is we're introducing an actual ordinance for your consideration should you wish to move forward with a short-term rental based on the various discussions we've had, including the one discussion we had with the Planning Commission and also their formal recommendation that took place back in March. Looking at the ordinance, and you have an updated copy with you on the dais here, we didn't deviate from the definition, the process, the public notice, the zones where short-term rentals would be allowed, the uses as far as being allowed in a single-family dwelling, an entire dwelling, or within an accessory dwelling unit. We quantified the number of short-term rentals you could have on a lot. We've addressed the parking, the noise, the maintenance, the landscaping, the acknowledgement by the property owner, the physical notice on the site, the compliance of other regulations such as the ADU, if applicable, as well as state and local components. We also added, the direction that you provided on the 12th, the property manager requirement that would include the contact information and local presence. That's item D13 on your staff report. And we've also had the inability to transfer the permit to another property owner should that site change hands, as well as the business license component. And I do apologize about item G, that we didn't put it on the drafted staff report, but you did get a copy of the language that was specified during the April 12th meeting regarding the enforcement clause. With that said, and then also we have the short-term rental permit cost, which is item H. With that said, I want to turn as much time over to council for deliberation. We have noticed this item as a public hearing, so we do recommend that you hold such public hearing. And staff, we will be more than happy to answer any questions regarding the work that we've done so far.
Thank you. The council did have some questions, so we'll turn the time to council questions.
We do questions before the hearing? I can't remember.
Francisco, when this was before the Planning Commission, what was the vote on this draft ordinance in recommending approval by the council? Do you remember that?
It was unanimous. I think some people were absent that day. I believe it was 4-0. I'd have to go back, check the notice, but there was no negative vote from the commission. Obviously, it didn't have component 13 and the drafted language. Prior to that, yeah, I'll just say that.
It's your votes on the staff report.
Oh, did I put that on the staff report?
Yeah, it's in the second paragraph, last line.
4-0 on March 15th. That was the only component that you've added so far is item 13, and then the specific language on item G. We added on H the $100 fee per one of your directions that you provided to staff, but that was it. Correct. A quorum is more than 3, so we were able to move forward on that item.
What other questions do you have?
Go ahead.
After you. It's
Rock, paper, scissors?
No, I insist. You go ahead.
I'll go ahead and lead out, since all of my colleagues, I've reached out to all of my colleagues, and I have some hesitations with the ordinance as it's drafted, now that we see it in person. I don't necessarily see the need for entire homes to be marketed as a short-term rental here in Bountiful, given the fact that we aren't a tourist destination. We're a bedroom community. Hotels are in short supply. ADUs as short-term rentals, that makes, I can get there. But unoccupied homes that are being rented out on a continual basis with constant turnover, I feel like it's truly impactful on the neighborhood. And it changes the dynamic of the neighborhood. And so I would be comfortable having ADUs as short-term rentals, but not entire homes. And I'm curious to know if anyone else on the council feels the same way, or am I missing a component that, do we really have a shortage in Bountiful of places to stay for out-of-town guests where that is a need? I don't see it as a need for entire homes to have that constant turnover. That's my thought.
I have some thoughts that follow along with what Councilwoman Sugurabar has mentioned. Because the very nature of a short-term rental in a whole home, and I think it's really important to designate between the two uses. A short-term rental that is in an accessory dwelling unit, I think that is one animal, and then the whole home rental is another animal. And so just speaking to the whole home rental, that it really does bring a sole business purpose to that home in the neighborhood. It becomes basically a hotel, a motel within a residential neighborhood where there has previously been reliance on existing ordinances that reflect the single-family dwelling nature of that neighborhood and all of the things that people hope and try and build within those neighborhoods. Whether that is the, reliance on consistency of neighbors and knowing who's on your streets. And so I lean towards what Councilwoman Sugurabar has mentioned as this is a concern in the whole home arena.
What other thoughts?
Since I think we're in question time for staff, I actually have a question that I'd like to ask. In reviewing this draft ordinance and the different comments we've heard from residents and emails and in public comment, one of the concerns we seem to have heard, and this is particular, I think, to the whole home rental versus the accessory dwelling unit rental. In the whole home rental, there were tragic events in Draper not too long ago about a party that got out of hand and resulted in some deaths. And so one of the things I've been curious about is ways to ensure that we don't have an ADU that is likely, the property owner is unaware that it's being rented for that purpose. So I'm curious, Francisco, if there are ways we can address kind of the occupancy ratio to ensure that if we're dealing with, a home of a certain square footage, that the expected number of guests match that square footage that home could hold, so that we don't end up with homes that are geared toward parties.
Yes, there are ways that we could regulate or mitigate that based on as how we see fit. If you wanted to go to that route, we could expand. I have spent a significant amount of time with my building official as of lately, where we could borrow standards from the building code regarding an occupancy square footage that would limit the number of people that is able to stay in a hotel, or in this case in a short-term rental. So we could incorporate such type of finding if the council found that appropriate.
So that ratio would exist independent of us?
Correct.
Crafted by other experts, and we would just apply it to almost a type of fire marshal type standard
Correct.
of what you should expect in that property?
Correct. It's 200 square feet per person. So an ADU, for example, if it was 1,000 square feet, it would be limited to an occupancy of 5 people.
And if the council doesn't mind if I explore this kind of question further, so if we were to work such a kind of a standard into the draft ordinance, and there were to be a party where law enforcement or code enforcement is called, that would then allow us to build a record so that short-term rentals business license might be in jeopardy at their next renewal if it was shown that they had repeatedly had parties and had violated that occupancy level.
Absolutely. And that's what we drafted on specific item G, where it would actually depend on the severity of the offense. If it was something major, like something that happened in Draper, we wouldn't necessarily wait until the next cycle. We would say, you're done. We're revoking your short-term rental permit and also your business license. If it's something minor, we would start, in a way, counting strikes, where we would evaluate those approved short-term rentals at business license review. So it would definitely depend on the severity of the case.
And
But
those-
absolutely, what you've indicated is correct.
And business licenses are renewed annually, correct?
Correct. They're due, they're supposed to be renewed every December.
Thank you.
Just further exploring what Councilwoman Bradshaw was bringing up, and you had just mentioned that could be something, or that is the occupancy ratio?
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you would anticipate being included as part of the permitting process? Like the square footage would be delineated in the permitting process and the occupancy?
Or could we add
Or
that
how?
to this?
No, we didn't add that.
Could we add that?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I
could
misheard.
we add?
We,
I was muffled, I apologize.
yes, we would want, if you felt that way, we could certainly add it in the ordinance. And it would absolutely be requested for the applicant to provide that information at the time of permit. Absolutely. And then in that same acknowledgement or notice that goes on the site, we would add, I believe it's item 10, we would add in that notice maximum occupancy 4, 5, 6, whatever number it is based on that standard. That standard is not based on the number of beds. It's a calculation based on square footage of that specific unit. It counts the kitchen, it counts all habitable spaces.
And these come from the fire marshal.
It comes from the building code. It comes from the IBC.
So there's a question about prohibiting the whole home short-term rental. There's a question about square footage occupancy ratios. If anyone wants to ask further questions or any new discussion items or questions you have.
I have a question if anyone else who hasn't spoken already would like to speak. I don't want to hijack it. I'm just curious, when it comes to zoning, I feel like the purpose of our zones in our city are to help businesses thrive in certain areas and to have neighborhoods flourish in other areas and so on and so forth. And I'm hesitant to introduce, as I said, full home rentals in neighborhoods where people who have bought those homes 5, 10, 15 years ago, however long, they moved into those homes in those neighborhoods with the understanding that that is what the zone would be. And I'll be quite honest in saying my first allegiance is to that, because they bought those homes with that understanding. And I feel that the city has a duty, although zones change all the time. I have voted to change, just a few months ago, a zone in just off of 5th South in our downtown area. So I understand that that is an occasional need, but in this particular instance, we're not changing a zone. We're adding another element to an existing zone. And so I feel like, and I've said this to my colleagues, that we are changing the rules in the middle of the game. And that just doesn't sit well with me when I don't see the demand of tourism in our city that could maybe qualify that a little bit more for me as it pertains to entire home rentals. So.
If I may, something that I'm also cognizant of that I think could be an unintended consequence of the whole home rental is, in addition to what my colleague has just outlined, is where is the demand for the whole home rental? I'm not sure we have evidence of a demand coupled with reliance on existing codes for the whole home. But I'm concerned about the long-term or even short-term impacts on housing affordability and housing accessibility. We are a city that is very much built out. We don't have a lot of space here in Bountiful City for additional housing stock to be added. When you have a short-term rental being hosted in a whole home, that takes that housing stock off the market for potential buyers or potential long-term renters. And I think that has a negative impact on the community as a whole in our efforts to create the type of community connectedness and preservation of the neighborhoods that we so value here in Bountiful City.
Comment if I could, Mayor.
Please.
We aren't introducing whole home short-term rentals. This ordinance is a move to regulate them and to remove bad actors. The council voted very recently to introduce ADUs into all of our zones and all of our single-family zones, fundamentally changing the flavor of those single-family zones. And we thought it was a good idea when we did it. The demand must be there or folks wouldn't have whole home rentals here in Bountiful available. I don't imagine that they would be listed and not used. We have taken steps to try to mitigate the potential problems. We also have spoken of a review process where we'll look back at this and see if there are issues that have come up. And I think that it's incumbent upon us to govern with the lightest touch possible. Again, this is not a move to introduce rentals to Bountiful, it's a move to regulate them. And if problems or potential problems can be mitigated, I think that folks should be able to do with their property as they see fit, in principle.
I just have maybe one quick question. Francisco, in your report, you indicated there's 93 either Airbnb or VRBO listings at the time of the staff report. Did you identify how many of those were whole home versus partial home? Chance?
Yeah, first of all, these could be repeats. We didn't cross-reference them.
Okay.
We believe a lot of them are, but we didn't cross-reference them. And we did break them down into entire home versus ADUs. I don't have that information off the top of my head, but we do have that. If necessary, I could probably search that on my spreadsheet.
Do
if
you
need to.
have like a general sense? Was it like half and half or?
The number changes, and we update this number every time we publish a staff report. So we get a new quick study. Most of them were single-family dwellings. Airbnb allows you to list just a room. Vacation rental by owner does not, which, by the way, is in direct conflict with our current code. It's supposed to be a unit, a house, not a bedroom. I'm sorry, I don't want to create an expectation or situation where it's accurate. I'd rather look it up. I apologize
It's okay.
about that.
And then maybe just in associated with that, do you know how many single-family homes are in Bountiful?
Yeah, so I did take a look at our moderate income housing report, which had projections from the state. The projections that the state gave us last year were 2017 projections, and the number of single-family dwellings is approximately 11,000 units.
Okay, thank you.
May I make a comment on property rights? I am all for property rights, but I think people need to be cognizant of where that property resides. If people would like to be the proprietors of a hotel or something along those lines, then that can be done easily in a place where there is commercial property available. It's for the same reason my husband and I own a dental practice. It's the same reason we don't have a dental practice in our basement. It's because it's not a commercial zone. It's zoned for single family. And we need to be respectful of the people who bought, in my mind, and this may be short-sighted on my part, I admit it, but I think for me, it's important to be mindful of those neighbors who bought those homes and their property rights as well. It's just all of us being aware of where certain businesses may be appropriate and potentially not necessarily appropriate. And I, again, am only referencing entire home rentals where a host or the person who owns the property is not on site. That's where I am. But I think, are we digressing from the discussion we want to have?
Well, this is an important component. If you want to include, if the majority of the council wants to prohibit whole home short-term rentals, then that could be part of what we do in this ordinance. So it's definitely relevant to the discussion. If anyone has any comments about that or square footage occupancy ratios or any other new questions?
I like the implementing square footage ratio. I think that's very much needed.
It might be appropriate, if there aren't any more questions, to open the public hearing
Okay.
and then come back for conversation about changes to the ordinance.
Is the council done for now with any questions?
That was actually going to be my suggestion. I'd love to
Okay.
hear from the public.
Well,
Great.
Actually, could I ask one question? There was well, no, I'll hold it. I'm
Are
okay.
you sure? Okay, we will now open this public hearing where you can speak about short-term rentals. Please state your name and your address.
My name is Ellie Rogers. I'm like a bull in a pen back there. Thank you for opening it up for public comments. I live at 1400 South, or 5 West, 1400 South. And I am here tonight to voice my opposition to the short-term rental ordinance that is being proposed. I feel very strongly that this ordinance does not properly address the concerns that have been brought before this council, and that it does not meet the needs of the majority of residents living in Bountiful's residential areas. I understand that this ordinance has been written to meet a deadline, but I believe this ordinance is being hastily approved to merely meet the deadline. I'd rather see the council vote no on this ordinance and devote additional time to addressing these concerns and getting input from the residents. I also have little confidence that this ordinance, as written, will have any real effect on how short-term rentals are permitted and enforced in our community. Since the last council meeting, I have done some research regarding the short-term rental properties on my block. Some are zoned as legal duplexes and are well within their rights to rent their entire properties. However, in allowing these property owners to their rights, we are subsequently allowing them to operate, some are zoned as legal duplexes and are within their rights to rent their entire properties. However, in allowing these property owners their rights, you are subsequently allowing them to operate a business in our neighborhoods and allowing them to take away from our community. These short-term rentals or mini hotels are not places where families, couples, students, or involved community members live. They often sit as vacant houses except for short periods of time. If we continue to allow whole home short-term rentals in our residential areas, we will continue to lose the very things that we love about our community. I do not want to raise my family in an area where there are empty houses and a lack of neighbors because we have allowed the number of short-term rentals to increase. I ask that this ordinance be put on pause and changed to include the following things. Number 1, whole home short-term rentals are not to be allowed. Property owners must live on site, much like our current accessory dwelling unit ordinance. Specific monetary fines for violating the ordinance and a 3 strikes you're out policy to bolster the insufficient enforcement of Bountiful City ordinances. Limit the number of short-term rentals allowed in a certain mile radius and implement a wait list for other owners seeking permits. And a determined time to revisit the ordinance and make changes as problems or concerns arise. In conclusion, I urge the council to vote no on this short-term ordinance tonight. By allowing this ordinance to go forward as it is written, I feel we are making a statement that we do not care about the future of our community that we are known for, the neighborhood atmosphere that we have created, and we are not taking care and providing affordable housing options for our Bountiful residents. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deborah Brown, 33 East, 2750 South. Thank you for your listening ears and your service to our community. I'm concerned that it appears that current budgetary allocations do not allow for enforcement of the ADU STR ordinance. May I respectfully suggest and request that future and existing money received by the city from these permit fees be used to fund a specific resource or even a part-time resource officer to identify the 80-plus persons who currently operate rentals in our city with the purpose of increasing compliance in obtaining proper permits. Ron and I, along with one other person that we know of or are aware of, are the only ones who have paid for the permit. And I believe it isn't too inappropriate for me to express my opinion on that, about how that money is spent. Also, I would respectfully request that a future discussion to amend the ADU ordinance for enforcement purposes be considered. The city has passed this ordinance that currently cannot be enforced, and to continue passing ordinances in the future on other issues may invite testing of boundaries, defiance of law, or a promotion of non-compliance creep. Or I would encourage formation of a citizens advisory committee to work in cooperation and a perspicacious manner with both sides of the aisle when an actively debated issue such as this needs to be addressed by our city. And I would also like to thank Mr. Astorga for such tireless work that he has done, and the rest of you. Thank you for your time.
Hey, here we are again. This has been a wonderful journey, you know. We've had a chance to visit with you guys. I appreciate your service and your time. And I appreciate, I sent you guys email from the people that have stayed with us before. And I got a suggestion from Kate Bradshaw to maybe share with you reviews from our direct neighbors who live right next door to us. So I think I want to share just a few highlights of that. Before I do, I wanted to tell you, we started with the Summerfest. We had people come from all over the world and stay with our house, inside of our house. We did that for years and years and years. And we have friends that we're still in contact with. And we're doing that right now with Airbnb people that stay with us. We've made lifelong friends. We introduce people from all races into our community and share with them our culture and our heritage. I was on the executive board of directors of Bountiful Davis Arts Center for years. So I know what it's all about, and I like it. So I'm going to share with you just a couple so that you know what my neighbors have said about me. You guys have all sent, I sent it to you. Kate had a good idea. So this is to whom it may concern. I live across the street from Ron and Deborah Brown on the corner, just southeast. Since moving here 4.5 years ago, I have been aware that they use their residence as an Airbnb. That has not inconvenienced me or caused me any serious concern. That's Suzanne Brown. She's not a relative of mine, but she lives across the street. Okay? Dear Bountiful City Council, Colton and I live across the street from our neighbor and friends, Ron and Deborah Brown, who Airbnb their basement. This has not affected our neighborhood in any way. In fact, the visitors have assisted us in shoveling the sidewalk during heavy winter snowstorms. Okay? We have no concern whatsoever having an Airbnb in our neighborhood. This one is a review from a neighbor, next door neighbor. Hi, my name is Marcy Godfrey. I live next door to Ron and Deborah Brown, right next door to Ron and Deborah Brown, who run an Airbnb in their home. I have no complaints. Their guests have always been very friendly and help and easy to get along with. In fact, it's been fun and interesting to meet and talk with these people from various places, various cultures, and various races, okay? It's been a real, Ron and Deborah Brown are great hosts with a real personal touch. I believe in loving your neighbor, I do. I believe in extending our friendship to people from all over the world. Okay, this is from Kathleen Clark. Ron and Deborah Brown, they live right behind us. Ron and Deborah Brown have been our neighbors and have been for the last 20 plus years. We share the back fence. The Browns are very quiet and neighborly. We have no objection as they are very responsible neighbors. If not, I'm sure we would have heard a problem by now. We see absolutely no reason why the Browns should not be allowed to continue sharing their home in this manner. I work as a school teacher, like your husband does. I work for a charter school, the #1 charter school in the state. And I have no retirement. This is my retirement. And I like sharing it with these people. The reason why we chose Airbnb is that we don't have to evict people or spend money out of our pocket to get them, the bad players. And we've had a couple, but usually we filter them out on this review process. We can read what their reviews are before they come into our home, and they review about us. And you guys, I sent every one of you our reviews, just a sample, okay? Airbnb does their best to protect hosts against renters who break the rules. Our house rules require no smokers, not on the sidewalk, not on the street, not in front of the house, not in front of our neighbors. Don't smoke. If you're going to smoke, don't sign up for us. And also, because we don't like it, we don't like picking up cigarette butts. We don't. And there is no noise and no check-ins past 10 o'clock. And for the past 4 years, I have met every one of our guests face-to-face that have come to our house and greeted them with a real nice, bountiful hello. So I move that we consider the ADU process. We're one of 2 people out of these 80 people who have Airbnbs. We're the one of 2 who have successfully achieved a ADU permit. And Nicholas came to our house and saw we have a nice house, a nice clean place for people to stay. And we only let him, rent the basement. So thank you, City Council, and thank you for all the work that you've done. This is a nice process where we're given a chance to speak. Appreciate it.
Thank you. My name is Brian Weston. We live on 1500 South, at 28 East on 1500 South. It's nice to be with you. I appreciate the discussion that the council has had. We've written, my wife wrote for both of us to the council members. I was a little disappointed in what Councilmember Higginson wrote back to us. It sounded like it was a done deal, and so there was no need to make any comment, that the ordinance was already set and all you would do is vote for it and it would be done. But it sounds like there also is a chance to maybe have some modification of that. But I appreciate the Browns' comments, because I think that that speaks to the advantage of having owner-occupied Airbnb or overnight kind of rentals or few-day rentals, because there's a lot of control of the kind of things that go on and input to the neighborhood, and what a great thing that would be. My wife and I have a cabin a little ways away, and we aren't occupied there, and we had overnight rentals for a time. Most of them were very good. But on one occasion, we had a group there that had a party. The next day and next several days, we were cleaning up beer cans and cigarette butts and so forth. And so we understand what can happen, and it can happen in a night, and there's no way to enforce it that night and to satisfy the neighbors as to what's happened when the owner is not close and when an owner is not part of it. So I think that there's a concern if the owner is somewhere not close at hand. So I hope that the ordinance could somehow include the need to have the ordinance right there. I spent some time in the last 2 days talking with Ray Ward, who introduced a bill in the legislature I think you're all aware of. As I talked to him about that, he said there was no intent in that bill to speak about overnight kind of things or short-term rentals. He said the intent of that bill was 2 weeks or longer kind of rentals. He said if it's interpreted otherwise, he said that wasn't the intent of that bill. And so he said his answer was, and I'm quoting him, he said it was all addressing long-term rentals, meaning the contract would be longer than the month. At least the owner would be living in the home, and perhaps longer than a month. So my request would be to the council, if you do approve a short-term rental, perhaps to modify the ordinance to say at least 2 weeks or some length of time that would give a little bit more control, so that if there is a rental that isn't good for the neighborhood, there'd be some way of policing it or getting input back to the city or to those who would then get some input that could then control it or regulate a little better. But I did like the discussion that talks about the concern about whole home rental, because I think that then can impact the neighborhood. So thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else?
Thank you.
I do appreciate, I also had kind of gotten the feeling that it was a done deal, and I was like, why have a public comment if you've already made up your mind in the back door? And so I'm really appreciative of your consideration. I do think there are just a few things. I absolutely agree with Ellie on her request that you vote no at this point, go back and revisit it, take the time to do it right. I think when the decision was made for the ADUs, which was I understand the reason they did, and the goal of affordable housing and in our areas, taking care of mother-in-law, older people or younger people or kids, there's a lot of need for that. I know that. But the short-term rentals were not addressed at that time. And I think it's important that they be addressed now and not just assume that it would be treated the same way as an ADU. And I appreciate the time that you've taken. Some of you have responded. I appreciate Millie and Cecily today for pointing out our property rights as well and balancing that, because we feel that that is not being considered, that the rights of being able to do whatever is overpowering the rights of being able to protect our safety and our property values and not drive people out who are the good, solid residents because they don't want to live in this hotel village. And so as it's happening in very high numbers, that I don't think whatever you've found is necessarily reflecting it. If it is, we've got an awful lot that 8 people in half of a block length, 2 streets over, have been displaced from housing in order to do STUs. So if we have a total of 90 or whatever in Bountiful, and we're seeing on 2 half streets, 8 people have been displaced for this, something's wrong with the numbers that it's not all showing up. Probably I do know a gentleman in Provo who rented his house sometimes just for Education Week, for BYU Education Week. So he's not going to be seen as somebody that's always on there, that at any given time you could go up and look at the numbers on Vrbo and Airbnb. And yeah, that's not to say that there isn't a place for it, but I do agree that it's a business, it's not a residence, just as the ADAs are intended to be a residence. And I also read the entire bill that Ray Ward did present, and yeah, it does kind of talk about short-term rentals in there, like typically less than 30 days. So I'm not kind of really clear by my own reading of that and what he has said, but what his intent was and how it was actually done may be different. And so, but anyway, my goal here is our quality of lives are important. And I don't want to be driving good homeowners, good solid citizens into other places because we're not looking out for what they thought they were getting when they bought into single family residences. I do feel it, as she mentioned, you feel a little bit like the rug's been pulled out from under you. And I've always told my kids, I intend to stay here till I can no longer handle it. And that's my intent. And over this issue, I'm starting to rethink that. And I hate to see that happening to anybody here, because I think we should value the citizens that have invested, that, they're here. And I've seen these people often that are splitting their house. It's a whole house unit that's being split into 2 rentals for a short term. So does that count in what you're saying as a whole house rental when they've decided the upstairs and the downstairs they can do it separately, and that's where we have lost our ADU renters? And so I think there's a lot to study. I think it warrants taking the time to do it right and to respect those who do and to have those limits that I think might be necessary. An older home has more likelihood of, number one, having a basement entrance already there, a canning kitchen. Most of the older ladies in our areas were putting in canning kitchens so that it was cool before they had even the air conditioning, and they could do canning kitchen. So it's a very easy conversion for somebody to come in and either make it an ADU or an STR. And I would just really encourage that, as you were mentioning, there could be zones where this kind of thing could be developed and could be accepted and more readily accepted without feeling like somebody has their own rights have been trampled in the process. I appreciate all of you that have answered me. I really do. I got a great response when I've tried to reach you in email, and I know that takes a lot of time from your personal lives and businesses, and so thank you. Thank you for considering it. Thank you for looking at all of the sides of the issue, and I just would recommend that you please table it, whatever you have to do, vote no, I can't remember all the process, but at some point, just give it time to really, really review all the sides of it. That enforcement, of course, is only as good as, I mean, it's a piece of paper if you can't enforce an ordinance. And so, you know, just throwing out some ordinances there on the paper, if you haven't got resources and enough teeth in it to actually make a difference, then it's really not worth much. And so that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else?
Hi, I'm Holly Kennington, and I live on Viewcrest Drive. I just want to echo what most of these folks have said, that short-term rentals don't belong in our neighborhoods. We weren't too crazy. Most of the neighbors I talked to when the ADUs went in weren't too crazy about those either, because it does change the dynamics in the neighborhood. But given that aside, we know that there are shortages. As a real estate investor, I recognize that the whole home short-term rentals owners can get more money by these investors. And I think that does not serve our communities well. That makes our kids less able to stay in town, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that anything that the council can do to limit short-term rentals, especially whole home, and I would hope that it would be as less favorable as we can, even in the ADUs. Certainly we can do long-term rentals, and that's great, and people know who their neighbors are and they get used to it. And I just think that Bountiful is a city of neighbors. I lived here all my life, always known who our neighbors are, and to have people coming in and out next door, not knowing who they are, is not what we're used to here in Bountiful. And I would hope that we'd be able to keep the same feeling. And second of all, we've referenced the Draper incident over and over again. It only takes once. It only takes that bad thing, you know, and all the enforcement doesn't matter if you get involved in that one incident. And I just think that allowing short-term rentals increases the likelihood of that incident happening somewhere in our city. And I am very grateful that, Millie, that you've brought up this whole home, and that there's been some acceptance of that that's not good for a community. And I think you find that most of our residents feel that way too. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Holly Keddington.
Thank you. Who else?
Hello, Council. My name is Chris Doherty. I want to say thank you for, I know you spent an exorbitant amount of time looking at this issue. It's an emerging issue, and I appreciate you addressing it. I'm also grateful, especially grateful for Francisco and Nicholas for their hard work. So thank you. I'd like first to say that I have concerns about the whole home STR units as well. I just received an accessory dwelling permit. I've been working with Francisco and trying to do everything I need to do to stay on the right side of our law here in Bountiful. And I do have a concern about the whole home SDRs, and the reason for that, I think it's a bigger issue than what we're talking about tonight. I think equally concerning is the long-term rentals and owners that live elsewhere. and whether their units be short-term or long-term, they can let both of them get trashed. I say that because I recently moved into the house that we're in right now because formerly I lived on the street that I grew up in, and it's trashed. I mean, it's just turning into owners that live around the country, around the state, and they don't care about the property. So anyway, at least with a short-term rental, we have ratings that we're trying to receive good ratings and have our home be very welcoming and taken care of. And so I would maybe address that larger issue of people just trashing. They're owning these properties and just letting them be trashed, whether they're short-term or long-term. So it's a concern that I can see in the city. I wanted to bring up a poll that I didn't do it, but somebody put this poll on Facebook. It was Denise Knight. If some of you council members probably know Mark Knight, they used to be on the council. His wife Denise, she posted a poll on Facebook, and you're from Bountiful, which is probably one of the most scientific polls ever run. And that, in one form or another, the people who voted on that poll, I went back and looked at it, there were 609 yeses in one format or another, whether it be whole house or ADU, or and then the no's were 96. So a 6-to-1 ratio of the proponents of the STRs, 6-to-1. So see if there's anything else. No, that's it. Thank you. I appreciate your time. You guys are doing awesome. Thank you.
Hi, Lisa Fawcett, 140 Coronation Circle. In the process of getting a permit for my ADU. So as I'm listening to you guys about the whole home, I get the concerns. House next to me is a vacation home. They're like 2 days a month. I love it. I would love an STR next to me. I don't care who lives there. If they're quiet and the yard looks nice and the garbage cans are in and the landscaping is nice, if strangers are coming and going, I get in certain neighborhoods with lots of little kids around, but not everybody feels like they need a set family in the house next door to them. So I just wanted to offer that perspective. I want good neighbors, but tourists can be good neighbors too. Thanks.
Okay, so Alex Densley, 443 Jerry Drive. I wanted to just kind of get some of the meetings because you guys deal with me all the time because I come and say hi to you guys because I kind of care about what goes on in our community. Obviously, just for, record purposes, this all started with House Bill 82. We've all heard about it. We've talked about it. There's been heartburn all over the place, mentioned multiple times in the city council. One of the biggest things that came out of House Bill 82, though, was the heartburn that the council had, that the city had, because they had this much control over the dwellings now. Our entire code went out the window, thanks state of Utah. So the council came together, and when it came to accessory dwelling units, you guys put together a very well put together, robust system. Like, it's top notch. Props to Francisco, Gary, whoever else worked on that. Like, you guys put together a really good thing saying that we want the owners here because we want the owners to have stake in this. We don't want, from those early meetings, we don't want people coming in and buying homes or changing out their homes and turning them into full duplexes. And the arguments made back then were, one, we want control, and two, it wasn't designed for the neighborhoods. We don't want duplexes just turning up every which way, okay? And so we put that requirement as a city, and it's been great. Have a really good friend who has an ADU in the back of his place. It's great. He's on property. He maintains it. He's there. There's stake in the game. I would just like to get to the meat of it, going to your actual code because I like to go read your code. So I'd like to first start with your, real quick, your definition coming out of your system. Once I scroll over to the right frame of it. So, in your land use ordinance book, it's chapter 3, section 13, 142, your definition coming from your guys' actual book. A definition of a hotel includes motels and bed and breakfast, a building designed or used as temporary, whoa, come on phone, come back alive. So I'll just start that again since I was bad there. Hotel includes motels and beds and breakfasts, a building designed and used as a temporary abiding place of individuals who are lodged with or without meals for compensation. That is your definition coming from your land ordinance use. Going to your table for the commercial district, so our commercial district does allow hotels, and I wanted to point this out as well as we're dealing with this ordinance. You have 3 definitions in your commercial zone: commercial heavy, CH, commercial general, CG, and then a CN, and I don't remember what the N is. It's like neighborhood, commercial neighborhood, okay? And at the very beginning of it, it talks about how, subject to the provisions and restrictions title, followed by the principal uses of structures and no others are allowed as permitted with permissible use, a conditional use, or not allowed. I wanted to get to the hotels because that's where our code in this zone talks about hotels. I would like to note that your commercial heavy, it's permitted. Your commercial general, it's a conditional use, and that your commercial neighborhood, it's not allowed. And that requires a half acre of land for your commercial neighborhood. So in your commercial code, you're not even allowing a hotel on a half acre of land that's designated as a commercial spot. But when we jump over to the residential side of it, R4, R1, R2, R3, R4, we are allowing a business, has to get a business license, into a neighborhood that wasn't zoned for it and meets the definition of a hotel, because now it's a commercial entity if it's a full home. Then where do we go with this? What does the neighborhood do? The reason why we have these zones set up is so that you don't end up with a mechanic shop in the house next door to you. You have it so you don't have a dentist, a veterinarian. You don't have something popping up next door to you that wasn't designed in that neighborhood. And if something like that happens, you're able to go to the city and say, hey, there's something going on that isn't allowed in your residential per the rest of your code. The other thing that I struggle with this, with the current proposal on it, is there's zero accountability if something does go there. Cool, we have a property manager. He's within 25 miles. The event happens. The neighborhood changes, new renter, new short-term person. There's talk of maybe a strike system, but there's no definition of what will, unless it's a worst-case scenario, Draper, of, hey, you're losing that. There's no setup there. I also want to avoid the whole Karen thing of like, oh, well, I know if I call 3 times, then I'm going to get this the rental's going to get pulled. My bigger concern on this that I would like to address is there's been talk in all the meetings that Bountiful isn't a destination place. Bountiful is. This is still new. Airbnbs are still new. Everything's there. When you think of Bountiful, why do you live here? I live here because I'm 20 minutes to the University of Utah. I'm 20 minutes to the airport. I'm 20 minutes to a Jazz game. I'm 30 minutes to Hill Air Force Base if I work there. I'm within 40 minutes of ski resorts north up in Ogden or down in Salt Lake City. If you are part of a predominant religion, that puts you in a pretty good place within multiple things that we stare at back behind us up there. It is a destination place, and there is no control once somebody purchases that home and turns the whole home into a short-term rental. It demolishes the neighborhoods, it demolishes the community aspect of it. I'm requesting that the council vote no in its current format. I don't think that there's anybody here that is against having a short-term rental in an ADU because the owner is there and has skin in the game. I think the problem that we are running into is there is this whole home mentality where now you have thrown a full commercial business into a now neighborhood where that owner could be anywhere, any place, who knows what goes on there. So I'm requesting the council please vote no tonight on the current format and address it and piece it out, as you have heard from many people here. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, we will bring it back now to the council for further discussion and questions with the council.
Mayor, if I can get a comment, I did get the numbers, the breakdown, so I can provide that if you'd like. Also, I could expand briefly on HB 82 if called upon. Would that be appropriate to go over the numbers
Sure,
as requested?
thank you.
This data was compiled on April 6, 2022. Airbnb listed a total of 74. 14 of them were single-family dwellings. That's 19%. 32 were accessory dwelling units, 43%. 18 were private rooms, that's 24%. 9 in multifamily dwellings, 12%. And 1 recreational vehicle. Verbo had 20, 10 of which were in a single-family dwelling, 9 in an ADU, and 1 in a multifamily dwelling.
Thank you.
Burvo had 1, Airbnb had 9.
What other questions do you have, council?
I have some, I guess, some thoughts to share, and then I have a suggestion of a motion that I'd like to propose, but not make the motion at this point so that it can be discussed, and then I'd be happy to come back and formally make it if it feels like there's support for the motion. First of all, I've said this before, but it's so much more fun to have a council meeting when people attend and have thoughts about what we ought to do. There's lots of times, unfortunately, where the public doesn't weigh in, which is fine. You've elected us to do our best job in making decisions. But sometimes it's really nice to have y'all weigh in with thoughts, with feedback, with personal experiences, with real life situations. And I don't think I'm alone when I say that we enjoy and appreciate the outreach and the dialogue. I think I've been on record during my council service, which isn't as long as others up here, but longer than some, that I haven't necessarily been a huge fan of accessory dwelling units. I grew up here in Bountiful. My husband and I returned here to Bountiful because we wanted, as our friend, Mr. Densley, our frequent commenter, Mr. Densley, we wanted this as a destination. We wanted to be here because we were seeking a neighborhood lifestyle and a community and neighborhood feeling, and wanted that feeling from the neighborhood I grew up in. And so I wasn't necessarily excited when the council at the time that I was not serving on made that first foray into accessory dwelling units. And I remember having that conversation with Representative Ward before he ran his bill when he was here to speak in favor of it as a resident of the city. It was on the books. We've taken a look at it. We've had those discussions. I hope to think that as I gain information, I'm capable and able to see multiple sides of an issue, and I think there is an affordability issue both for the owners of properties and a life cycle that can be assisted with accessory dwelling units. And so I wouldn't say I've become a fan, but I've felt that with some proper restrictions, there is a place in our community for some ADUs, and it's a good thing I've decided to feel that way since the legislature has told me I feel that way now, thanks to HB 82. But I do feel strongly that there ought to be limitations and restrictions put in place on ADUs because it is a change to that single-family zoning. I firmly believe that when someone buys a home here in Bountiful, they are not just buying the cement and the drywall and the bricks. They are also buying that assurance of the zoning, that our zoning underpins what it is they can expect in that immediate area. And I think it's important, and I think it's our duty to uphold it. Zoning occasionally changes. In my opinion, zoning ought to change only occasionally, very infrequently. It ought to be a fairly dependable thing. And so I feel that because we have not acted on short-term rentals broadly, we have allowed a little bit of an erosion of that single-family zoning that I feel it's important to uphold. As I've dived into this issue of short-term rentals, and our two very different silos of short-term rentals, our accessory dwelling unit short-term rentals and our whole home short-term rentals as two broad categories. It seems to me there are some key differences, and some that I can accept, and some that I don't think we ought to accept in our single-family neighborhoods. I think, again, with some appropriate structure, there's a place for short-term rentals inside an ADU because of that owner on site. I think it's critical. A number of the things that are drafted in here, and another one I'm going to propose, I feel like that gives the proper structure to asking neighbors to accept that a home that they thought was going to be a single-family residence will now house two families, or occasionally a rotating cast of other families. And I commend, we've had a great dialogue with Mr. and Mrs. Brown about the ways in which they share Bountiful with their guests. And I appreciate that you have not only done that, but you've been willing to share with us how you do that. So what I would propose is I would propose a change to the ordinance that was drafted in our packet, that we do not allow short-term rentals in whole homes. And I have some suggested language when it's the appropriate time, some amendments to the code as drafted that I would suggest in order to do that. I would leave in place the silo for short-term rentals in accessory dwelling units. I would, in the proposed ordinance, there are some restrictions that we put in place for those short-term rentals, and one of those that I would add under a motion that I would make would be that the occupancy the site shall not exceed the International Building Code occupancy standards for the square footage of that property. And that be something that's required to be posted as well, so that the short-term renter cannot help but be fully aware of what their limitations are. So at some point, if the council is interested, I would be happy to make that in a formal motion, but wanted to explain why that would be what I would support. Thanks for indulging me.
Thank you. What other thoughts does the council have?
Curious, the enforcement mechanism that'll be in place to enforce that restriction on number of folks.
So,
and if there's an effective enforcement mechanism, let's just go ahead and say no parties and enforce that too.
Look, let's not go all footloose on this. Yeah, since it was filmed in Utah, in Lehigh, we're Bountiful, not Lehigh. I'm not naive enough to think that we have a robust code enforcement system that would satisfy me or would satisfy a lot of our residents, quite frankly. We have a complaint-driven system. And as I've checked with and as I deal with other cities in my day job, I find that is the norm. Code enforcement is, by and large, complaint-driven. So were we to pass the amendment, I would suggest, I do not expect that Francisco will be using the Airbnb listings because the state legislature has said we cannot use the online listing. Something to keep in mind for other elections this cycle, to those in attendance. I have no expectation that he will be using that Airbnb list to go and check and enforce. It will have to be driven by complaints from a neighbor. The neighbor will have to file a complaint with the planning department. The planning department will then have to go investigate, and then if it's found that they're in violation, that they are a whole home with a short-term rental, then we'll have to apply that ordinance. I don't think it'll be easy. I think it'll be slow. I think it'll be burdensome, but it may, because one of the things I think that is important is that we are seeing home prices jump astronomically, and I can't help but think that some of that is driven by those investors that want to buy these homes and turn them into profit centers. That if they do their due diligence in our code, they may choose not to buy the homes for that purpose, and perhaps we'll slow them, and perhaps there will be some spread of word of mouth. I'm not under any illusions that this will be the magic bullet to enforcement.
Question for you. If we're going to trust ADU owners who are on site to make sure their renters are not nuisances to the neighborhood, why don't we also just trust them to rent to the appropriate number of people and not put the additional restriction on?
I think that I'm placing a lot of trust in the on-site ADU owners. But, I've shared this with my council colleagues before. I'll share it with our residents in attendance and online. I spent 6 years serving on Salt Lake City's Housing Advisory and Appeals Board. That board dealt with a myriad of housing issues, and it required that we visit each site before we would hold the meetings for the different properties that were on the agenda. And it left me with an interesting viewpoint on properties that people are willing to convert when they're doing something to drive a profit. And so I don't necessarily, I'm going to appeal to your Ronald Reagan-ness that we would trust but verify, because of some of that experience of those 6 years serving on that committee, where sometimes some interesting places were carved off into apartment units for rent that were not safe, didn't have adequate egress and things like that. And I hope that Francisco's process that the planning department has put in place would never allow that to become a permitted ADU. But I'm still in the trust but verify evolution of ADUs. But that's just, to borrow a line from my favorite colleague on the far end of the desk, but that's just me.
So.
Can I just make a quick comment on that too? Just to add, I think what Councilmember Bradshaw said is right. It'll basically keep the honest people honest. It's nearly impossible to enforce. It will almost always occur at night, and we don't have our code enforcement officers there. The police will arrive. They have certain standards as prescribed by our Constitution as to what they can and can't do. They can't even get in the house to see how many people are in there. So it just becomes a question of how many people are there. And even if they can see more people than the occupancy, they can just say, well, they're just visiting, they're leaving. So it's going to be very problematic, just to be honest.
I guess the other thing I would say is, if there was an ADU where perhaps the owner was living in the house, but often at work nights or something like that, and wasn't home. It would build a case toward a property that had repeated issues, and then when their annual business license was up for review, that might be something then that Francisco would use. Again, I don't think this will immediately solve problems. It won't be the immediate solution to frustrations in a neighborhood or the micro frustrations that will build up and I think erode some of that community fabric that exists. But I think it's something I'm willing to propose and see if I can find 2 additional friends.
I'm pretty sure you can.
I could get behind that motion, but I'd like to add something to it. But I'd also just quickly, to the Westons, is it? I think maybe, I read Councilmember Higginson's email, and just, I think it may have been misinterpreted. Well, no, from your comments, I believe it was misinterpreted a little bit. The whole point, which I think he was trying to convey, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it was just simply that this ordinance is, what we're trying to do is create an ordinance so we can enforce, so the city can do all of the things that your neighborhood feels like it needs and that I feel like my neighborhood needs and everyone. This is so we can make those enforcements. It wasn't a blanket, no, this is done and your comment doesn't matter. He was being very direct, which I appreciate. And so I have great respect for him. And so I just want to make that be known. And then on, well, I do. In regard to the potential ban is, I hate the word ban, but not allowing full home rentals. Was that your proposal, Councilwoman, Councilmember Bradshaw? Prohibition. Oh my gosh, we sound awful. But in addition to that, I would propose the occupancy, did you include that as well? The occupancy ratio? As well as I would like to see if anyone else has the desire to have a rental minimum, whether it's a 2-night minimum stay or a 3-night minimum stay, to maybe add some stability to the internal, or not, to the ADUs that we could have as STRs. There's too many acronyms. Or would another night minimum stay be more appropriate, or do we just go with what we have now and then revisit in a year? That's my question.
I think it's a compelling idea. And I say that recognizing that we have multiple audiences who we're representing here. And while we're representing the desires and the needs of those who wish to have an ADU and utilize it as a STR in the B-Town, I just wanted to come up with one more, the BTUT. Anyway, oh, that wasn't a good acronym, sorry. Sorry, don't ever say that one again. Anyway, I think we have our allegiance is to all of our many, multiple, varied audiences throughout the city, and trying to find that right balance that gives assurance. And I, too, acknowledge our enforcement issue, but the fact that we acknowledge that we have shortfalls in our enforcement mechanisms, I don't think that that is something that should should lead our guiding principles. I think our guiding principles in any form of legislative work, which this is, should be for those things that are aspirational, for those things that we want to see in our city and that represent our community standards. And for the reason that I feel like we represent so many multiple audiences, especially with respect to this issue, I think that the idea of a minimum stay is compelling, and I I think that's worth considering.
I have a few thoughts. Yeah, I agree with you that we do have a wide range of people we represent, and I think it's an obligation to try to find an appropriate balance between competing interests and providing protections for property owners and homeowners and families, and protecting our neighborhoods. It's very important to me. I think government often swings from one extreme to the other. And I think Lloyd mentioned once that he likes to move in small increments and not big swaths and testing it. And I don't know that he was using that in reference to this, but I think it's also applicable that we need to and we want to make changes to our code so that it does protect homes and property values and all of these things. But I think to get into the fine details all at once, I would maybe just caution against. I'm not necessarily opposed to what Councilmember Bradshaw was suggesting, but that I would be in favor of the changes that we have written here that's been drafted by Francisco, while getting data, collecting information. So far, the city doesn't have a lot of information. We aren't able to track, and I think that the steps that we've put in place here, or may put in place here, does accomplish much of that. And that we can come back and visit this at another time. And that's the wonderful thing about city government, is that we do meet on a regular basis, and we are able to make changes more quickly and readily than the state or other forms of government. And I just think that we should be careful to go too far, while still trying to find that balance that protects everybody.
Councilmember Bell, could I
Yes.
just ask a clarifying question?
Yeah.
So are you advocating for the passage of or you're advocating for the ordinance as presented in our packet with no changes, with no alterations?
Not necessarily. I don't oppose what Councilmember Bradshaw made in her verbal discussion
Right.
changes.
Okay. And I just would say, I really appreciate your referencing going in incremental steps. I think that's appropriate, especially when this is something that really has potential to affect every single resident and every single street, every single neighborhood in our city. And it's very hard to put the genie back in the bottle after you have gone very far. And I would, posit that Councilmember Segura-Barr's recommendation of minimum night stay also is in the spirit of incremental steps.
But doing the math that Francisco shared with us, we're about 0.5% of all units in our city is being used as a short-term rental. It's not significant. It's providing a critical need and use. And I think there are some concerns, and we're trying to address those tonight in a way that we issue a permit. We have the ability to remove that permit. We have the ability to track. So I don't see a strong need to start tying hands of individual property owners in more than this tonight.
I just want to clarify, it sounds to me like there's a number of changes that are proposed, and so I'm wondering if we want to avoid legislating on the fly to that extent. So I think maybe we can try to get some consensus of so that staff has direction. So if the council is ready to give some direction about where you are on prohibiting whole home STRs, the square footage occupancy ratio, and if you want a minimum night.
So I would respectfully, disagree, Mayor. I have the paper marked up and ready to go. I have consulted with staff on where I would place the insertions and the deletions. I do feel like, we've had the planning commission has discussed this in a work session and a meeting. We've discussed it in 2 work sessions and tonight. I feel like we currently have properties that are operating in this gray space. They are neither expressly permitted to be short-term rentals in the city of Bountiful, nor expressly limited from operating as a short-term rental in Bountiful. And we'll continue to just let them sit in this uncertainty. So
If you want to go ahead and read
we can make it and see if there's 3 votes for it. If there's not 3 votes for it, then I'm happy to explain my chicken scratch to the staff for a future drafting.
Sounds good, thank you. Is there any other comments before Councilwoman Bradshaw?
You go ahead and make your motion.
I've got a comment. After Millie's done, I've got a staff comment. Sorry.
Let's hear it.
Or were you done?
Go ahead.
Just additional food for thought on that enforcement piece. One consequence that might come of that we've heard a little bit from here tonight is we may have frustrated citizens, either that are calling staff or you, that want or the police that want something done, and that's always difficult when you tell them, well, there's really nothing we can do when it's in our ordinance. So just something to think about. I'm thinking of a couple of situations where some citizens complain and we've given them the answer that we're somewhat powerless, and I think it's worth considering before we put that in. I understand the reason for it, but there's always that potential, and I think we will get some frustrated calls from time to time. And then I was just going to suggest, I think it's very important that we make sure that we're very clear on what those changes are, and then if there's not consensus, then it would be my suggestion. And if it differs from what we've looked at before, I would suggest tabling it so we can think about what the unintended consequences might be. But with that, that's all I've got.
May I ask a follow-up question
Yes.
to that? I'm a little confused, and maybe it's because I've only served on the council 2 years, and I understand staffing shortages, and I understand these things, but I struggle with the line of, well, we're going to pass this ordinance, but we can't enforce it. How can we?
We're talking just specifically about the number of people in the unit, the occupancy limit, because we can't, there are laws that prohibit us from verifying that number. Say there's a complaint made to the police specifically that this house has too many people. We don't really have the ability to just go in and inspect how many people are in there.
So you're talking about that one element?
Yeah, sorry. If I wasn't clear, I'm sorry. I'm just
Okay.
talking about that one piece.
For everyone that's listening at home.
Only that element.
Yeah, sorry.
What we could enforce is the rest of our nuisance ordinance, noise, parking, trash, whatever else is, but it'd be nearly impossible to enforce that, and we just have, it's very hard when people call us and say, your ordinance says this is illegal, but we can't enforce it, and in that case, we just shouldn't have it in our ordinance.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't clear. I was just talking about the number of people, and it's not to say that it couldn't be enforced. I think it's just very, very unlikely, because even if you can get somebody, police officer, code enforcement officer, whoever it is, up there, even if it's a cooperative, let's see, it's somebody going through Airbnb and they're the host and they're saying there's that many people there. How do we prove it? How do we prove that the occupancy says 12, but they've got 14? It's very difficult.
And a follow-up question to that, and this might be for Francisco. I know that cities are not allowed to use Airbnb or Airbnb and Vrbo, those websites, to confirm or to cross-check
That they're operating.
operating.
STRs.
But does that also extend to, I guess, so could you use records, like booking records? Because I know when people book, you have to say how many people you're reserving for. And this might be, maybe we're getting into the weeds, but this is just my own sheer curiosity.
We argue.
So we can't use the advertisement from VRBO and Airbnb, but can you use the transactional history from them?
Yeah, I don't think we want to get to that aspect of enforcement. It would be very similar for a city requiring hotel records for verifying, say, 4 occupants in a hotel, they have 5. We don't know of any city that goes to that extent. It would be very similar. And by the way, if you have an approved ADU with a recorded notice, you are able to use the internet. That was part of the confusing part of HB 82. That did make an exception for approved ADUs. Approved ADUs, we can go ahead and use the internet for compliance.
Oh.
The confusing part was it said that, and then it did talk about for the purposes of offering a long-term rental of 30 consecutive days or longer.
Okay.
So that's why it threw people off, as it did have one little tiny aspect of short-term rentals.
We can't regulate by looking at online ads for recreational vehicles or
for if we don't pass a single family. It says that if we have enacted an ordinance and there is a recorded notice for the ADU, which our code currently requires, then there's an exception to the state law indicating, prohibiting municipalities to use the internet.
Thank you.
I have a question. Say we pass this ordinance as Councilmember Bradshaw has drafted. How does that go into effect, and how does that affect people that have booked their unit next month or in 6 months? How do we address that, and do we want to give notice or something to that effect?
They've been operating in this limbo area where we don't acknowledge the use, but then we don't at the same time enforce as a expressly prohibited use. So, I mean, for further comment, I would ask legal counsel on that, on how to proceed on those.
I've seen ordinances that basically amortize it, say, 45 days from now, 6 months from now, whatever.
Could I ask for clarification to our city attorney? You're saying that we can only enforce on the things that, if someone were to call and complain that there was a party, we could only enforce on those things we could see from the street, with the exception of if a police officer had reasonable cause to enter the home for some other potential crime. But you're saying if he can observe from the street
I think you
only
could
what
get to
that-
the doorstep. And every situation will be different, whether it's a basement or an ADU, a detached ADU or whatever the case may be. And that would also depend on if the host is cooperative and then there would be a little bit more flexibility there. That would require some training for our police that get called to those, out to those calls. And there's always the possibility that you go to the door and they tell you the truth. They tell you that, but that's also something that the police officer would have to figure out what the occupancy is for that particular house. The noise ordinance, things like that, are a lot easier to enforce because it's what we do anyway, and it's what they do anyway. This is a little bit of a moving target where every single ADU that they would, short-term rental that they would go to would have a different number. So they'd have to know what that occupancy number was, and then they'd have to be able to figure out who was there. And one of the, as I mentioned earlier, one of the problems is that even if they got, an occupancy of 12 and they've got 16 people there, all they have to say is, yeah, we had them over, we're having dinner together, or we were watching a movie late into the night, and they're leaving. And that if they say that, then they're not staying there.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I'm happy to hear your motion if we're ready for that.
Are we passing down the gum? Okay.
Yeah.
Just going to the audience too.
I'm hungry.
I have a question. I know it's not permitted from the people, but how do you define a whole home? What's the definition of a whole home?
So thanks for that question. We can discuss that.
You guys can discuss it.
Thank you.
I'm going to suggest that I think we do have a definition in the code that will define what a unit is, a dwelling unit, and that's what will be our guide on whole home versus an ADU, which has its own specific definition. And unless I see Francisco giving me an eyebrow, I'm going to assume I'm right.
I just want to say we do define accessory dwelling unit. We do define single-family dwelling.
What line are you on?
He's within the code.
Oh, you're within the code.
I'm just looking at
Excuse me.
definitions.
Well, it's kind of moot if it's just to apply to an accessory dwelling unit. You don't need to define a single-family home because it would be only allowed in an accessory dwelling unit.
Correct.
So.
Okay. Are you ready to offer a motion?
I am ready to offer the motion. And I hope everyone's got their fresh copy so they can follow along. So the motion I would make would be the following amendments to the Exhibit A that was provided on our desks at the start of the council meeting. So in Section A, I would strike a short-term rental is a residential dwelling unit or. So I would strike that. I would capitalize "and." At the end of that sentence, I would add "is a short-term rental." So that sentence would now read, "An accessory dwelling unit rented on a temporary basis for a period less than 30 consecutive days is a short-term rental."
Very cleverly crafted.
Hang on, there's more. Any questions, or anyone want me to repeat that?
You can continue.
Okay. My next amendment would be to D2. In the first sentence, the words, and it's toward the end of that first sentence, single-family dwelling and. I would delete those words. In the second sentence, which happens to be on the third line, the second sentence, I would, yes, line 27, I would insert after the word "a" and before the word "duplex," single-family dwelling, comma.
There is an issue with that, as ADUs primarily in our city are located within a single-family residence.
Let me read you the whole sentence with those amendments.
Perfect.
Short-term rentals are only allowed within approved accessory dwelling units. It is unlawful to allow, construct, or reside in a short-term rental within a single-family dwelling, comma, duplex, comma, or multifamily residential dwelling or property.
Richard's point is still correct, because single-family accessory dwelling units can be within a single-family residence.
What if it
Add
said
word
single-family
entire private
dwelling
single-family
lacking, oh, sorry. What if it said single-family dwelling lacking
This
an
is.
approved
So
accessory dwelling unit?
This is exactly the point we're trying to make, that we would prefer that you give us the direction so we can take the time to get the ordinance right and bring it back, rather than trying to craft this on the fly. It rarely works out well.
Thoughts?
So Francisco has suggested adding the word entire single-family dwelling. I'm going to, with all due respect to our city manager, I'm going to finish where my amendments are.
Sure.
And then if there isn't a second, or if there is a substitute motion to ask staff to take those amendments and draft them into something else, then I'll let that motion stand as it may. Okay, so adding that word then, entire single-family dwelling on line 28.
So that second sentence would read, "It is unlawful to allow, construct, or reside in a short-term rental within an entire single-family dwelling, comma, duplex, comma, or multi-family residential dwelling or property."
Correct.
Can I just say, or clarify, multifamily would be also categorized as a duplex. If it's a duplex, it cannot have a short-term rental, correct?
Yes, and in part because keep in mind, we're only allowing, under my proposed changes, a short-term rental within an accessory dwelling unit. A duplex does not meet the definition of an accessory dwelling unit. It can't have an accessory dwelling unit because it is a duplex. It doesn't have that owner occupancy requirement that is an overlying requirement for an accessory dwelling unit. And multifamily also doesn't meet that, those requirements.
Okay.
Okay. In D, Part 5, I would strike all of the first two lines, because those lines would pertain to whole home short-term rentals, so they wouldn't be required any longer. So next, I would insert a new number 7.
Councilmember Bradshaw,
Yep.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Could I go back to item 5?
Sure.
So would that begin on
So you would start on line 36 with
Parking
if
space.
an accessory dwelling unit is approved as a short-term rental.
so the first 3 lines?
Yeah, 2 sentences, 2 full sentences.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and adding number 7.
I would make a new 7, so I would change that numbering going forward. The reason it seemed to make sense to add this new 7 is this is the amendment related to the building code occupancy. And it seemed to me that it flowed best kind of in that same noise ordinance, following that noise ordinance. That new 7, I would propose to read, the site shall not exceed the International Building Code occupancy standards based on unit square footage. I'll read that again.
Say that again.
The site shall not exceed the International Building Code occupancy standards based on unit square footage.
Would be better to say STR. The STR shall not exceed.
If you looked at, so in 6, in following the similar language, it says the site shall comply. So I was seeking to just mirror that same language.
The old number 7 says the site, and 8 as well.
Okay.
D 7, 8, and 9 are items that apply to whole home short-term rentals, so I would strike each of those because they would no longer be relevant. In D10, it's in the first sentence. It's on line 57, between the word parking and at the end of that line. I would insert occupancy standard, so that that line would read, prior to short-term rental occupancy, the property owner shall place a notice behind the main short-term rental door to make occupants aware of parking, occupancy standards, and noise restrictions, etc. All right, and then this is the last one. D13, I would strike entirely, because that property manager concept idea that we had discussed would apply to whole home. ADUs would already have that overarching requirement for an on-site owner. And that is the motion I would make in changes.
I'm probably the only one that missed this, so just so I'm clear. So the existing, not your new number 7, the ones that are printed on the page, 7, 8, and 9 all go away?
Yes, existing 7, 8, and 9, and 13.
And 13.
Okay, is everyone clear on the proposal?
I'll second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. Are we clear on the language, staff?
I think so.
Are we clear? Thank you so much for your help. Thank you, everyone. Okay, we will now move to consider approval of the proposal from M&M Asphalt Services. Mr. Cheney.
Thank you, Mayor. In recent weeks, we've had several contracts for projects or maintenance items. Slurry seal is very important to the maintenance of our streets, and it's been necessary to rebid this contract. M&M Asphalt Services, again, the low bidder for this. We've worked with them for the last 5 or 6 years, and they've done a very good job. Now, that's not to say that they're perfect, but they have been very responsive and done a great job for the city. And we would recommend that the council award this contract to M&M Services at the unit prices listed in their proposal. I'd be
So
happy-
moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. That motion passes. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.